Am I the a-hole for refusing to meet my mom after she went no contact with me for over a decade? So, a little background. I'm 35 male and my parents divorced when I was 17. My dad struggled with alcohol and drug addiction, and my mom eventually left him, which I totally understood and supported. Living with him was impossible. He wasn't violent but verbally abusive, and he spent all our money on his habits. That was the last straw for my mom. After the divorce, my dad spiraled. He nearly overdosed and ended up in the ICU. I was living with my mom at a time, but I was scared that my dad would die, so I moved back with him and my uncle's family. My mom was disappointed, but let me make my choice. Losing my mom, most of his friends, going broke, nearly dying finally got through to my dad, and he promised he would get better for me. It was hard to watch, but he actually turned things around. My uncle paid for everything: rehab, therapy, medical bills, and after about 5 years, my dad was clean and somewhat healthy again. He even apologized to my mom, and she forgave him, though she told me later it was only for my sake so that they could be civil at future events like my graduation or wedding. Over those years, I kept in contact with my mom, regularly met with her. She had moved on and met a great guy, who she eventually married. She was much happier and I was happy for her. I thought we had a pretty good relationship. That changed when I was 23. My mom asked me to come over and she told me she was still angry and disappointed that I chose my dad over her after the divorce. She said I was ungrateful for everything she went through, putting up with my dad's nonsense, and then she hit me with something that still pisses me off today. She told me she could see me becoming a drunk and a drug addict like my dad because I stayed close to him. I don't drink, I don't do drugs to this day, and I had no idea where that even came from. I was floored. I thought we had moved past all that, but apparently she'd been harboring resentment for years. Then she said that she wanted to go no contact with me because being around me brought back too many bad memories of my dad. She said she had found peace and happiness, and I was a reminder of all the pain she'd been through. I didn't know what to say except okay. I later found out from a cousin on her side that her whole family was angry with me for staying with my dad back then, and they all went no contact with me for her sake, saying that I betrayed her. I haven't seen or heard from my mom since that day. Fast forward to now, my dad passed away 2 years ago from a heart attack, a result of his years of addiction. Despite being clean for over a decade, he had lingering medical issues. I recently got married and my wife posted some pictures from the wedding on Facebook. My wife said a woman claiming to be a cousin contacted her. I looked at the message and it was cousin from my mom's side, asking if it was really me in the pictures with my full name. I told my wife to ignore it, but then I got a call from my uncle later that same day, saying that my mom showed up at his house. For context, the house where my uncle lives currently used to be the home where I grew up with my parents. My uncle said she asked him to arrange a meeting between us, saying she wants to apologize to me face to face. He told me he can set it up if I want. Honestly, after all these years, I feel nothing for her, except maybe a slight resentment for thinking that I would turn out as an addict. I was going to say no right away, but my wife thinks that's a crappy thing to do and I should at least hear her out, let her apologize, and then go back to never seeing her again if I want. She says despite what she did shield me from most of Dad's addictions growing up. Now I'm having second thoughts. Am I the a-hole if I refuse to meet her? Not the a-hole, but I am wondering if you are an only child. Her reasoning might be that since you got married, you might also be having kids, and she wants to be a grandmother. You have to think about what her ulterior motive might be, and this is what I come up with. One of my reasonings is also this. She never cared before. That cousin probably told her about the wedding pictures. Not a-hole. I think you were very kind to be there for your dad when he needed you, even though he should have been the one taking care of you. It was really cruel of your mom to punish you for that kindness, and whether or not you want to hear her out is your decision. I do like your wife's attitude, that you can hear your mom out and then decide if you want to forgive her or not. But what your mom did was horrible, and it would be understandable if you didn't want to talk to her. I agree with everything, except your take on the wife's attitude. I think she's pushing her own feelings, not supporting Opie with this. He doesn't owe his mother hearing her out, just so she feels less guilty. My wife is just looking out for me, so that I don't have any regrets. I know she will fully support me if I say I do not want to meet her. Next story. Am I the a-hole for waiting to divorce my wife until it was a good time for me? My ex-wife and I were married for over 20 years and have 2 children together, 22 male and 20 female. For most of my marriage, things were pretty balanced. We both shared housework and childcare responsibilities. We were each stay-at-home parents for over a year after each child, her with our son and me with our son and daughter. We always had agreements in how we wanted to divide work and generally had decent communication. This changed when my oldest went to high school. My wife got a new job that was both very demanding on her time and was 50% travel. This meant that I had to handle everything about 2 weeks per month. And when she was home, she wasn't holding up her side of the work with agreements. I did my best to be accommodating, and we worked through redistributing chores/housework a few times to make it fit her schedule better. But a lot of the work just kept falling to me. When the pandemic happened, things got worse, but I tried to just suck it up because I know the lockdowns were temporary. Finally, when things opened back up, things continued to decline and I asked to go to counseling. She missed a lot of our meetings and just didn't commit to it. At this point, I decided that I wanted a divorce. Unfortunately, it was a really tough time for the family. My son was getting ready for college in person after his freshman year being remote, which was both financial and logistical challenge. At the same time, my daughter was also having some issues with depression, and I had become her main support person, with my wife gone half the time. I made a decision to wait until my daughter was in a better mental state and our family was in a financial stable place before I filed for divorce. I did my best to continue to contribute and was essentially a single parent for 3 years. On a few occasions, I brought up counseling again, but my wife said things were good and we wouldn't go. We pretty much weren't intimate for that period of time, and there was one summer where she essentially moved to North Carolina for 6 weeks for work. She came home on some weekends. Last year, after my daughter started sophomore year of college and she was in a better place mentally and emotionally, I sold off some of my stock investments to create a trust for my kids, to ensure college was covered. Then I filed for divorce. At first, my wife was really mad. Then she left to live in North Carolina again. When she came back 4 weeks later, she said she wanted to work through it. But I told her I had made a decision to leave years ago and wasn't interested. We eventually worked through mediation and got an amicable divorce. My kids live with me now and support me, but all of my in-laws and even most of my family outside of my sister think I'm a-hole. They believe I should have forced the issue more when we started counseling and either divorced or made it clearer to my wife how important counseling was to me. They've called me selfish, and some of my in-laws are refusing to interact with my kids when they're at my house. For example, my daughter FaceTimed her grandmother once this summer, and she hung up once she saw that my daughter was at my house. They also created a bit of a scene at my son's graduation in the spring, refusing to acknowledge me and demanding that my son choose to celebrate with them or me, rather than having dinner together as a group. I encouraged my son to go with them and we had our own celebration later, but something happened at the dinner and my son has lived with me and been almost no contact with them since. I honestly feel like I did what was best for my kids, but now it feels like their mom's family's punishing them, and I feel like a terrible father. I admit that it might have been more mature to address the issue head-on with my relationship with my ex, but I felt that it was about more than just the two of us. Frankly, I feel like my lack of backbone years ago has made this divorce worse for my kids. But I also believe that if I had to do it again, I would still prioritize my kids over my own feelings and make the same choice. Am I the a-hole? Now for the top comments. Not the a-hole, you did your best for your kids. His titles should be changed to, until it was good for me and my kids. Both Opie and his ex check out years before. Family are mental for being so childish around Opie. The kids clearly know who are the unreasonable ones, given son has already cut them off. Opie shouldn't worry about the trash taking itself out. Be thankful. Not the a-hole. Oh no! You wanted your daughter and family to be in a stable place before you left someone who didn't try at all? The horror. If they wanted to be petty, they can be. I understand feeling guilty, but you can't take on responsibility for the actions of others when you tried your best. Staying for an extra 3 years gave everyone the best outcome. And it's not like you didn't push for reconciliation. Your wife dropped the ball massively and just went, Your kids support you and their opinions are really the only ones that count. The apple didn't fall from the tree as far as the ex is concerned. They're all a selfish, irresponsible bunch and willing to take any responsibility, and quick to blame others, and having that excuse them from any consequences. Seems the kids made their choice, and they sided with a parent that was always there for them, and doing everything they could to preserve a relationship with the other side of the family. Unless Opie has no faith in his kids, he should trust their judgment a bit here, and actually let himself be selfish for once, and feel vindicated by their actions. Of course, the in-laws are gonna bark and piss and moan because their golden angel got blindsided by a divorce. A separation she cemented when she told you, "No, I'm not going to counseling with you." Your in-laws sound not only insufferable, but incapable of accountability. It may be too much effort to explain to her a-hole family that you tried for years to fix the marriage, but she was too busy, somewhere else. Not a-hole for doing what's right for your children. It sucks the in-laws are being horrible to them, but hopefully they'll develop new relationships and bonds with other people who aren't incapable of empathy or rational conversations surrounding major life events. Last story. Am I the a-hole for telling my dad to cherish his other son because he's the only one he has left? Made this account a few days ago. Debated on actually posting about this because it's stupid, but here I am. So I'm 17 male and I'm graduating high school this year. My parents divorced when I was like just shy of 2. Long time ago. Dad remarried, mom remarried, then divorced again. She's single. Dad had another son with his wife who is now 14. My whole life, his other son has taken more importance. Told me I'm the older brother, so I should be stronger and not make a big deal out of it. I was like 9 years old, standing looking out the window waiting for my dad to show up, just for him to call my mom to tell me he can't make it, because the other son had a dentist appointment and he's freaking out. It was literally just a checkup. Yeah, no, sure, understandable. Let me just go F myself. Stupid things like that. He ditched my sport games for random reasons. Not even just because of my brother. He didn't come to my talent show when I was 15 because he didn't want to. That's it. Didn't want to. No plans, nothing he had to be at. Just didn't want to. I spent months learning guitar and a song to play for him since he loves guitar and he loves that song. Oh well, let me go F myself again. My parents don't have a good relationship, but my mom doesn't keep him for me. I've heard their conversations, he just doesn't want to be there. I don't know. At one point, I asked my mom if he really was my dad, and she said yes, and asked why I'm saying things like that. I asked why does he hate me then? Emotional moment, but it passed. That happened just before my 17th birthday, and since then, I've just kind of stayed in my lane. If he reached out to me, I'd say hi, but I wouldn't ask him anything. I wouldn't hug him if I saw him. I wouldn't beg for time together. Kind of indifferent, I guess. Not saying he was never in my life, but he was really only there for the moments that literally any other person would call him a dick for if he wasn't there. Birthdays, short visits on Christmas, had surgery when I was younger. He was there for that. Anything else though? And he was busy like 70% of the time. Well, last week he told me he regretted being so absent in my life. He told me he had pre-planned a trip for him to drive me to college when I start. We would leave immediately following my graduation and we would just drive across the country. Info, not accepted to any college yet, but I've spoken to the one I want to go to, which is in Washington, and it's basically guaranteed with my grades. I told him not to bother. He should spend his summer with his son. I do want to say that I've never said no when he asked to hang out or talk on the phone. I always said yes even when I didn't want to, just to keep the peace and not cause issues. As far as I'm concerned, though, I don't have a dad. I have a mother and a man who occasionally spares time for his other kid. He didn't like my reply and said I'm his son too. Lol, not gonna lie, I laughed and asked since when. We kind of fought after that and didn't end on a good vibe. I told him I was planning on dropping contact when I turned 18, since he was probably going to do the same. So I bothered keeping this relationship alive when he's never wanted to know me and I stopped wanting him to. He's been trying to reach out, but I shut it down every time. He dropped by, but I don't see him. He calls me, I decline. He messages me, I ignore. Yesterday ago, I messaged him. Hi, Dad. Please stop trying to talk to me. I truly want no relationship with you. You never wanted one with me, so I don't see why you're acting so hurt by this. I don't know if you never cared about me because of your own hate for me, or your wife who never let me come over. I don't know, I don't care. I realized I do not have a dad a while ago and really accepted it recently. I'm not mad, I just don't care. Keep the same energy now that you've had the last decade, and stay away from me. I hope your relationship with your son stays just as important to you because he's your only kid. Have a good life. Dad told my mom's mad at me, and told me I should give him a chance because he's trying. Not wrong, I do feel kinda bad because I could tell when he was describing our trip, he was excited. Oh well, I wanted a dad to be proud of my achievements and my grades, but instead I got a good job card from a drugstore and an I'm proud of you text. Really sincere. Mom's still trying to guilt trip me and I'm starting to feel like I should just do the trip, then block his number when I'm at college. It's another year of faking smiles with him, and I just don't want to do that. It would be easier though. I don't know, am I the a-hole for all this? You're not any kind of a-hole. In fact, you're giving your dad exactly what he wanted all along. A son he doesn't talk to much, who stands on his own 2 feet and doesn't expect much from his dad. That's what he created. If he wants something different, you both need to agree. It's not up to him to decide you'll be a happy family now. Agree totally. Mom actually is quite the a-hole here too, trying to still force the issue. Doesn't sound like either parent actually looked out for OP. She won't be the first parent I have seen who tries to encourage their adult, or almost adult, kid to give their useless ex additional chance. Or the last. In my experience, it's not a commentary on the parenting as a whole, usually the opposite. They've usually been no less than 95% of the total parenting that child has received and have quite often worked themselves stupid to do it. I think sometimes the parent who is left behind with a kid, for want of a better phrase, takes the obligation to protect the child from the other parent's crap almost too seriously, and it ends up that they're trying to protect an image the child saw through long ago, thinking that doing that is the right thing to do for their child, and not recognizing that the child has outgrown the pretense. I know parents who are now grandparents but are still trying to convince their kid that their ex/kid's father has changed. It's definitely an issue in this scenario, although OP should maybe see if he is at risk of getting his mom in trouble for parental alienation. I know he's very close to being an adult, but still, that could be why she's still trying to keep the peace. But I don't think it's necessarily reflective of OP's mom as a parent on the whole. Not the a-hole, not even close. I would probably do the same thing. He was an absent, crappy father. He doesn't get to decide to have a relationship with you now. You don't owe him anything. Protect your peace. Maybe someday you'll choose to forgive him, maybe not. But it's your choice, not his.